I am delighted to be here with you today at this, the first of the reviews by the 5 regional commissions of the implementation of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. The outcome of this meeting will set the pace and the level for the reviews that will be followed by other regional commissions in a process that will culminate in March 2015 at the Commission on the Status of Women. So you are the leaders in this process. We expect you to raise the bar, no pressure, in order to make sure that we stimulate as much hard work from the other regions. This is our chance to take a real frank look at progress. We need to be absolutely clear-sighted about where change is happening, where change is still not happening, or is not happening fast enough. And we need to be prepared to agree and act on what will remedy this. We also need to make sure that out of the discussions that we'll have here, we will have concrete plans. We have now received a record total of 158 national reports on the implementation of the commitments that were made in Beijing in 1995 by member states 20 years ago. I want to thank you for those reports. I want to thank these regions because every country has submitted their reports from this region. This information, together with the analysis that will come out of the discussions and the work that will be done by the Commission, together will give us a clear picture of the common factors of success and the challenges that are remaining. I also urge you to build your discussion on the outcome of what will emerge from the NGO forum that concluded yesterday. I'm sure some of it will be shared with us today. Civil society, as you know, is our greatest ally and a constant, vigorous challenger of the status quo. Mr. Executive Director, I must also thank you and the Economic Commission for Europe as a crucial partner of UN Women in realizing gender equality, the empowerment of women, and the human rights of all women and girls. Thank you for convening us in this manner. I commend the many important gains that countries in this region have made. This is where we can also find some best practice and pockets of excellence. But like many other regions, there is also a lot of challenges and progress is unequal. In fact, a report that has just been released of the World Economic Forum, Global Gender Gap Report 2014, Northern European countries dominate the top 10 on improved equality for women in the workplace, understandably so. But globally, what is shocking is the gender gap for economic participation and the fact that opportunity has closed by just 4 percentage points since 2006. On current trajectory, it will take another 81 years for the world to reach gender equality. Clearly, this is not something that is acceptable to this company. And this is also a wake-up call. Because even when we are doing the best that we're doing to progress, where change and progress is uneven, those who are on the low side of the scale are very low. And those who are on the high side of the scale are very high. And that creates serious inequality. Discrimination against women continues in law and in practice in many countries. And of course, this region has also not been spared of those inequalities. But I have to say, where a lot of work has been done in this region, be it in supporting childcare, be it in enacting laws that fight violence against women, be it in addressing education as well as ensuring that there's greater opportunity for girls to enter the labor market, we have been able to gain some best practice that I hope we have also been able to pass to other countries. But where we have limitations, I think we ought to use this opportunity to improve significantly, because in some ways, in this region, it is quite close. Significant and bold changes can enable this region to finally close the gender gap. And I'd like to highlight some of the issues that I think need attention. Women still face the main burden of unpaid care work. The gender parity gap still persists. Many countries are still far from equal representation in boardrooms and management positions. And crucially, women's representation in parliaments remain low, and many political parties all over the world, including in Europe, are not concerned enough about this issue. In some ECE countries, the ratio of women to men is as low as 1 in 10. Violence against women, like we see in many parts of the country, remains a challenge here. 1 out of 3 women experience intimate partner violence or non-partner sexual violence in her lifetime. And women from marginalized groups, and that includes women who are migrants, face multiple and intersecting forms of discrimination and inequalities. What is good is that this is well documented in this region, and that therefore the evidence helps to guide us and to direct us where we need to make changes, something that is a big challenge in many parts of the country where research and documentation of desegregated data is much more difficult. So that puts the region sort of in a better position to address the challenges. 15 years ago, at the Beijing +5 review, we set the year 2005 as the target date for the revocation of laws that discriminate against women. But almost 10 years later, we still have not reached this objective. We are in fact witnessing a rise of conservatism and pushback on gender equality and women's empowerment in some places. The issue of revisiting legislation and making sure that we repeal those statutes that discriminate against women is a priority that we must tackle head-on in post-2015. At the CE's report prepared for this conference, it has been highlighted that we need to strengthen gender machineries, increase their influence in policy decisions. And again, this is a challenge not just in this region. This is a challenge that we see in many parts of the world, where women's ministries are junior ministers, underfunded, and are not as influential in their governments, considering that they are responsible for the most marginalized sectors of society in any country. In the reports, in your reports also, you have highlighted the importance of increasing political and financial support for the gender machineries, and increasing their access to key policy and decision-making processes, and increasing their human and financial resources. All over, budgets are unrealistically low for some of the challenge that we give these departments, and in some ways we increase expectations from society, but when we are unable to support them, we set them up for failure, and we give an impression to society that they have not done their job, and yet it is often not their mistake that they have not been able to do their job. In 13 countries, government spending through national women's machineries was less than 0.4% of GDP. Spending levels have either remained flat or fallen as a percentage of GDP, and since the financial crisis, which again has hit the women the hardest across the board and in all countries. This is truly a critical moment in the struggle for gender equality, and we must seize the moment and make it ours. And there is a strong political will in this region, and I believe that it is that political will that we can tap on in order to make sure that we address the gaps. That is going to take unprecedented resolve and commitment, of course, when it comes into allocation of resources, because we know there is competition for resources in many countries. In crucial areas of development cooperation, especially economic empowerment and peace and security, women benefit from only a small fraction of the investment. The total volume of aid commitments targeting gender equality and women's empowerment has tripled in the last decade, but only 2% of development assistance program in the area of economic empowerment directly targets women. In the area of peace and security, only 3% of the resources are geared towards protecting women's rights and enhancing their participation in peace processes. I'm sure we know what has happened and is happening in Iraq, in northern Nigeria, in Syria, in Somalia, to name a few, where violent extremists are taking control of territory and directly threatening and targeting women and girls in their communities. What this implies is that the nature of the conflict and the impact it has on women and girls has changed. It requires us, therefore, in the work that we do in peace and security to change as it impacts on girls. As I was reminded this morning, 5 of the crucial members of the Security Council are in this region. We need their support to change the narrative on the way in which the conflict impacts women and the responses that we need to be given. And that comes along with the manner in which we need to allocate resources. ODA does not benefit women to the extent that it has. And we need help to address the manner in which gender-responsive allocation of resources can be a way of life for governments, not something that a few governments do because of pressure groups. This has to be the way of doing business. Next year, 2014, will mark 15 years since the passage of the landmark Security Council Resolution 1325 on women, peace, and security. And as you know, we will be doing a global study, and I hope that through that study, we will again get evidence on where we are falling short and on possibilities for us to close the gap. Ladies and gentlemen, in this and in all these areas covered by Beijing for Action, we already have a robust normative framework in place, including the almost universally ratified Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. I will not name names of those who have not ratified, but I think there's one in this room. This agenda now needs to be treated with political agency and to be adequately financed. It is an important agenda and it unifies us, because the fact that we all submit, most countries submit reports, through those reports we generate a lot of information that enriches the work that we all do. This agenda needs to be treated with political agency, and this agenda needs to be embraced by governments just as it is embraced by civil society. Our first and most pressing global deadline is going to be next year in 2015, when we would be concluding the preparation and the deliberations for post-2015. Concurrent with our work on shaping action to vastly accelerate the implementation of the Beijing Platform for Action, member states will be moving into the final stage of crafting the post-2015 development framework. It is vital that in our regional and global development cooperation, you remain vigilant in the process to maintain a strong gender goal, as well as the targets and indicators on gender equality on other goals, and carry forward the same messages and the same commitments. We are glad in many ways that Goal 5 in the draft is secured. We are glad that there are indicators across many of the goals, but the indicators are unequal. In some of the goals, the indicators are not strong enough, but even of greater concern, across the draft, the rights language is not strong enough. This is something that I'm asking you to continue to pay attention to. I know that in this region you've been very strong on addressing the issue of the rights language. We still need you to continue to be vigilant as far as that is concerned. We also need you to help us to address inconsistencies, for instance, to make sure that both women and girls are addressed with the same intensity in order to make sure that we don't shortchange any of the two. We would like, as UN Women, for you to think of the period 2015 to 2030 as the last mile to break the back of gender inequality. We think what we have in the Beijing platform gives us a lot of strong purpose to enable us to do that. We think the reviews will strengthen us to know where we need to tighten up, but more than anything else, we need the political resolve to make sure that the implementation will have one aim and one aim only, to have a game-changing impact. 2030 is far, but I want us to see 2030 as the expiry date of gender inequality, preferably well before 2030. We cannot have an open-ended challenge and struggle on gender inequality that will see us sitting here again 20 years later having the same discussion. It is only when we count year on year the progress and the intensity of the progress that we'll be able to make the kind of change that we want to see in 2030. This is my call to you today. As you look at the review that you're making and the proposals and the suggestions and the recommendations that you're going to make, keep in mind that we need an end game. We need game changing, and we need to use both the language and the action to achieve that. I ask you to demonstrate the strong leadership that I know you have and commitments to advance women's rights and counter conservative agendas that are inimical to women's rights. I also ask you to reach the most marginalized women and girls and tackle start and rising inequalities and multiple forms of discrimination. I want us to also tackle and change our language. When we talk about 30% of representation of women in government and other institutions as progress, we must know that we risk entrenching that as a norm. It is therefore the reason why in the World Economic Forum report, a projection that we will reach gender equality in 81 years can be a reality. Because not unless we talk about gender equality and nothing less, we will continue to dig ourselves in to what in the end of the game becomes underperformance, and we will then be settled with mediocrity as a way of life. When we talk about gender parity as what we are struggling for, we will then consistently aim to reach that, and in the fullness of time, which must be short, we should be able, therefore, to reach the targets that we want to reach. Let me also remind you of the powers that you have in relation to supporting and investing in women and girls around the world. I want to share with you what an inspiring commitment that Australia has put forward. The government of Australia has set a target of requiring that at least 80% of investment, regardless of their objectives of ODA, will effectively address the gender issues in their implementation. Can you imagine if at implementation that is done, how much we could completely change the impact that this has on women? Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, everywhere I go, I meet women and girls in markets, in schools. I also meet leaders of governments, CEOs, and small business who have a sense of agency, who want to take this forward. It is important that we harness these varied constituencies. In UN Women, we feel strongly about ensuring that we mobilize young people, that we mobilize men and boys, that we mobilize traditional leaders and religious leaders, that we mobilize members of parliament and leaders in governments in all their forms, And of course, that we also mobilize media to take greater responsibility for advancing gender inequality. As 2015 approaches, the work streams on gender equality, climate change, a new development agenda in women, and peace and security are converging. Pressure is intensifying for world leaders to deliver on decades of promises and commitments to gender equality. As far as leaders are concerned, we hope that and are planning that in 2015 September, at the back of the General Assembly, leaders will sit around the table and they will share with us their commitment of how they intend to move forward after Beijing plus 20. So where there were fears that Beijing plus 20 will be, Beijing declaration will be swallowed up by the post-2015 agenda, I want to tell you categorically, we don't intend to do that. We intend that to continue, and in fact, we're going to ask leaders and heads of states to make specific commitment to how we take that forward, and that will be in September 2015. So at national, regional, and global level, we must ignite a movement that is big and broad enough to achieve gender equality and ensure women and girls' human rights. As the first of the regional review, I also ask you to raise the stake, to make sure that you communicate a message that says that we are open for business unusual, because business unusual will not solve the problems that we are trying to solve. I want to also issue a call out again to women's movement to be as strong as it has been, a call out to men and boys to be part of this journey. I invite them to participate in our He for She campaign and to take a stand in support of gender equality. I want to issue a call on young people, both men and women, to take an active role. And I want to issue a challenge and a call to the media to collaborate with us and to be part of taking this agenda forward. In 2015, at CSW, we hope together we will present a comprehensive report of the progress that we have made. We will also have an opportunity to celebrate the achievements that we have with civil society, with governments, and with everybody that will be there in New York. And after that, all our eyes will be on ensuring that the post-2015 agenda meets the demands that we have, in particular in relation to ending violence against women, to leadership and representation of women, and to economic empowerment of women. Thank you.